you think you learn more in a small business or medium?
I think you learn more in a smaller because they have to include you in a lot more projects, right? They don't have the $1 billion LMI budgets, khaki budgets, Booz, Lockheed, Raytheon, and the NPM. I started at Booz and I went to Aero Alliance, which was a lot smaller. They won about $25-30 million worth of contracts in the last 6 years. So they lost the contract because the government didn't fully understand when they wrote the SOW on what they wanted the contractor to do, because they asked for technicians. What they really wanted was senior Marines and senior government persons like myself that had technology. For us to get into technology, we have to get rid of our 20 years to 30 years. There is a cyber path for us, the analytic path for us, but to have the knowledge that they want, you've got to be really civilianized, right?
Welcome to the Best8a Podcast. In this episode, we talk with John C. King, former USMC Senior Logistics Manager and CEO of King Global Enterprise Solutions. Here's what he had to say.
The name is John King, from Missouri. I was born actually in Texas, but joined the Marine Corps back in 1995. 1 year graduated out of high school. It's called the Delayed Entry Program. Enlisted in the Marine Corps, went to boot camp in 96. I was a food service guy for a while, won a few awards for food service, and you know, as a young Marine, winning awards at that level is it's impressive.
Awesome.
And by the time I was a corporal sergeant, I thought about getting into the officer program. I already was in college, and so I joined the officer corps in 2004. So I was enlisted for 8 years in the reserves and then on active duty as a food service specialist and a comptroller. So a comptroller is somebody as a fiscal budget technician that runs contracts and manages budgets for various Marine Corps units. So then I became an officer, and I stuck to logistics because it's the most common place, and as I researched when and if I retired or when I got out, logistics had the most bandwidth of opportunities outside of the Marine Corps. Nothing wrong with being an infantry officer, artillery officer, or pilot, or any of these other officers or MOSs. It's just like, I saw FedEx, UPS, I saw some of these very large logistics companies, but I stayed. I did a total of 25 years reserve active duty, and had multiple deployments: Iraq, Korea, Liberia, Norway, and deployments across the United States, meeting dignitaries, meeting presidents, meeting ambassadors, all high-ranking generals working at the Pentagon. It was a great experience. Not everyone's experience is that, but I shaped my career into what I wanted it to be. Right. At the end of the day, I had a say in what my Marine Corps career looked like.
So mainly at that point, you were U.S. Marine Corps person, logistics person. That's the main.
Right. I was logistics. Various organizations of logistics, senior program management at the Pentagon, managing logistics for all the Marine Corps units, or managing logistics to help NATO forces and U.S. forces in Norway, right? So I've seen logistics at very high levels, doing logistics and exercises in Korea and Liberia. I was a logistics officer in Iraq, but I was more combat logistics, right? You're worried about your people and your convoys and what enemy is before you, and IEDs and small arms fire or heavy arms fire. All of that is war, right? It was combat, so it wasn't. Go ahead.
Yeah. What was your transition like? How does that work?
My transition, I'll admit, I thought I knew enough to transition, right? I had time at the Pentagon. I had time at high levels. I had an MBA before I retired, and so I'm thinking I should get a job anywhere. Not necessarily the case, right? Because of all that military experience and all that high-level experience, I pursued the civilian market. I didn't have Scrum. I didn't have Lean Six Sigma. I didn't have Agile. And those are all very important things within supply chain logistics, transportation, especially those entry-level roles. I didn't understand that I had 25 years of military experience. That doesn't convert into the civilian marketplace.
Really? But wasn't that the obvious thing to call a government contractor and say, hey, I was just here, let me just switch, go on your side? Didn't you think about that?
So for 5 months, I pursued the civilian market. Then I went to contract and GS role. And then I started getting hits on my resume.
Oh, gotcha. So at the beginning, say, hey, I'm going to go to, logistics in the totally private commercial world. You didn't think about the government contracting world.
No, because I thought I could convert simply. But, I didn't have this, and the MBA didn't count enough for leadership roles that I was looking for. And junior entry-level roles, I had too much leadership for them to be like, we're just going to put you in this junior role. We know you're not going to stay. I wish they would have given me the opportunity, but nor here nor there. I'll tell you, it was one of the Big 10 in D.C. They had this junior officer recruiting program. I can't remember the Big 10, but you think of the Big 10 contractors, right? I went to this conference. It was a 2-day networking and hiring event conference. Some of us got hired. A lot of us didn't get hired. But one of the hired managers, a senior hiring manager there, nice man from India, didn't understand how the military necessarily worked, but he'd been there for like 20 years, and he's like, he explained what's a Marine Corps officer, and I explained all that. But at the end of the conversation, he goes, you're a good dude, John, and I don't want to see you come into this organization and go to a good team and then get snatched to a bad team because it's going to ruin your career, right? Now, we retained friendship on LinkedIn. It took him a couple months after the hiring event to reconnect, but, he was basically trying to tell me, you're a good dude. You don't want to come into an environment like this and ruin your career.
So do you think it's common that people, federal employees, they try to go to civilian and then they fail and then they say, okay, government contracting is something like in the middle? Is that something that you have seen happen?
For a lot of the folks that I transition out, because they want to be so far removed from the Marine Corps, and if they don't have the success or they don't feel like they have the camaraderie, if they don't feel like they have the same purpose, they will come back to government contracting or being a government employee. Now, I don't have stats because I don't keep a record like that. But a lot of my peers after being in the civilian market will call me because they know I'm a recruiter and say, hey, John, what are you noticing out there? And I'll give them various hints and things how to navigate the market. So, look, the Marine Corps keeps calling me back. It keeps me employed, right? Yes, I do contracting with the government and I do recruiting for various agencies, but as far as like a regular W-2, the Marine Corps keeps calling me back. I'm not upset about it because I have a family, I have bills. Being an entrepreneur, as all entrepreneurs know, it is like this. You can't believe the Grant Cardone and the other insurance guy, right? Because they never tell you the struggles that they had 20, 25, 30 years ago. They're only telling you the highs because they're billionaires, but they're not telling you the initial startup phases, right? It's like, I guess you do follow me on LinkedIn, and that's why I document everything. That's why I blog everything. So when that time comes, I'm not getting Rolexes and Lamborghinis, but, there will be signs somewhere like, hey, you just won a nice contract, or hey, I hit the lottery with a couple of my candidates. You know what I mean? So, there'll be some signs.
So federal employees, what is your advice for federal employees when they're thinking about retiring? To have started their own business, to be employees in civilian, to be employees in government contractors? What is your advice?
My advice for federal employees, I've tried to tackle this before, is for example, one of my clients, he was with NASA for a long time, like 14 years. He became a contractor for a little bit, and then he started his own contracting firm. But I think his specialty is like cybersecurity, intelligence, and that kind of thing. And he partnered with Lockheed and CACI and some other large organizations, and he has contracts with NSA. But how that all started was relationships, right? It was all relationships. And so the senior SBA small business contractor appointee by President Biden, her name is Miss Jackie. She told me in a text, she goes, find relationships. She's like, you have this much years of experience, just ask somebody to put you on a contract. And that's basically what's happening now with some of my contract experience is I asked a larger firm who I built a relationship with a year prior. They have won a large contract. They're asking me to do RFQs with them. It's relationships. Recruiting is relationships. Transitioning out is relationships. Having your own business is relationships. Being in contracting is all about relationships. So as a federal contractor, as a federal employee that's been here for 20 years and is retiring, they have the landscape already. They know who the big primes are. They know who the medium primes are. Develop those relationships. I'm sure there's some stipulation. You can't go right back into your agency, but you could probably go to an adjacent agency. Say CACI. CACI's a big one, right? CACI has multiple contracts across, but you retired from U.S. aid. Okay, you can go into the DOD, but it's a different CACI person, right? CACI has this person is in charge of U.S. aid, and you might have worked with them, but now you can go to DOD or you go to TLA or some other agency that CACI owns. It's the relationships, right? I have a peer out there.
What is the difference, you think, John, between deciding, okay, I'm a federal employee, and my transition is going to be I'm going to go to a large government contractor like CACI or going to a small business government? What do you think is the difference?
Depends on really what you want to do, right? If you want to have that sweet golden parachute, you go to a large contractor. But if you want to grow and you want to be part of the grind, you go to a smaller team, right? And you get to learn. Not saying you can't learn at CACI or Booz or the larger firms, but you go to a little medium firm, a firm, any firm between 5 and let's say $40-50 million have won contracts. That's a good place to learn.
I think you learn more in a small business or medium.
I think you learn more in a smaller because they have to include you in a lot more projects, right? Because they don't have the $1 billion LMI budgets, CACI budgets, Booz, Lockheed, Raytheon, and the NTM, you name the top 10, they don't have those budgets, right? But you go to a smaller, look, I started at Booz and I went to Aero Alliance, which is a lot smaller firm. They've won about 14, I forget how much, but she's won about $25-30 million worth of contracts in the last 6 years. So decent firm, has a little more salary. We had a great relationship, me and her and the team. They lost the contract because the Marine Corps, it could be my future employer. The government didn't fully understand when they wrote the SAO on what they wanted the contractor to do. But the contractor we were performing that, because they asked for technicians, what they really wanted was senior Marines and senior government persons like myself that had technology. For us to get into technology like that, we have to get rid of our 20 years to 30 years of experience. There is a cyber path for us. There's a data analytic path for us. But to have the knowledge that they want, you've got to be really civilianized, right? Like we had a contractor on my team.
Civilianized? Is that a verb?
Yeah, it's a verb. It's a verb. It's a verb I made up, civilianized.
No, I love it.
We had a contractor on our team who had his master's in data analytics. He knew Tableau, he knew advanced Power BI, all of that. But he wasn't being utilized in that way. They wanted him to write documents and papers. And that's not what he was hired for. He was hired to take big data, analyze it, calculate it out, and present it in digestible form.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to John. Goodbye.